The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones outside Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the metal barriers. Sarah Mitchell held her 7-year-old daughter, Emma's hand tightly as they joined the crowd, waiting to see the changing of the guard ceremony. Emma bounced on her toes with excitement, her blonde curls dancing as she tried to get a better view of the mounted guards. "Mummy, look at the big horses," Emma whispered, pointing at the magnificent black horses standing perfectly still with their riders. The royal guard sat motionless in their red tunics and tall black hats, like statues carved from stone. Among them was Thunder, a powerful stallion with intelligent dark eyes that seemed to watch everything around him. The ceremony began with the sound of drums and brass instruments. Emma clapped her hands together as the guards marched in perfect formation. She was so fascinated by the spectacle that she didn't notice when her mother's grip loosened as Sarah reached into her bag for her phone to take pictures. Behind the crowd, a man in a worn gray coat watched the scene unfold. Marcus Hartwell had been driving his taxi through London's busy streets for over 15 years. But lately, things had become difficult. His wife had left him 6 months ago, taking their own daughter with her. The court had denied him visiting rights after what they called concerning behavior. Now he's spent his days driving strangers around the city, watching families everywhere he looked, his eyes fixed on Emma as she giggled and pointed at the horses. Something twisted in his chest as he watched her joy. She reminded him so much of his own daughter, Lucy, with the same bright smile and curious nature. The loneliness that had been eating at him for months suddenly felt overwhelming. Marcus stepped closer to the crowd, his hands shaking slightly as he watched Emma bounce excitedly beside her mother. Sarah was now completely absorbed in taking photos, holding her phone up high to capture the ceremony. The distance between mother and daughter grew by just a few inches, but it was enough. Thunder, the lead horse of the guard, had been trained for years to read situations and people. His ears twitched as he sensed something wrong in the crowd. The horse's nostrils flared slightly as he caught an unfamiliar scent of anxiety and desperation. From the man in the gray coat, the ceremony continued with its ancient traditions. But beneath the pageantry, a dangerous moment was about to unfold. Marcus took another step forward, his eyes never leaving the little girl who stood just within his reach. Marcus felt his heart pounding as he moved through the crowd. People were packed shoulder to shoulder, all focused on the colorful ceremony happening before them. No one paid attention to a middle-aged taxi driver in ordinary clothes. He had parked his black cab just around the corner, engine still running. Ready for what he told himself would be a quick ride. She just needs someone who understands her, he whispered to himself, repeating the words that had been running through his mind for weeks. Someone who won't let her down like everyone let Lucy down. Emma continued to watch the guards with wide eyes, completely unaware of the danger creeping closer. She tugged on what she thought was her mother's coat, but Sarah had moved slightly to get a better angle for her photos. The little girl looked up, confused, as she realized she was pulling on a stranger's jacket. "Where's my mummy?" Emma asked, her voice small and worried as she looked around. The crowd suddenly seemed enormous, filled with legs and coats and unfamiliar faces. Marcus saw his chance. He crouched down to Emma's level, forcing a gentle smile onto his face. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I saw your mummy just a moment ago. She asked me to help you find her. She's waiting by my taxi just around the corner." Emma's lower lip trembled. She had been taught never to talk to strangers, but this man seemed to know her mother. "She did?" "Of course," Marcus said, his voice soft and convincing. "She was worried you might get lost in this big crowd. Come on, I'll take you to her right now." Thunder's rider, Corporal James Wellington, felt his horse shift beneath him. The stallion's muscles had tensed, and his ears were now pointed directly toward the crowd. Wellington had been riding Thunder for 3 years and knew every one of the horse's signals. Something was wrong. The horse's training kicked in as he sensed the child's distress and the man's deception. Thunder had been bred and trained not just for ceremony, but for protection. His ancestors had carried knights into battle. That protective instinct still ran deep in his bloodline. Marcus gently took Emma's small hand in his. "Come along now, your mummy is waiting." He began to lead her away from the crowd, toward the street where his taxi waited. Emma hesitated, looking back toward where she thought her mother should be. "I don't see her," Emma said, her voice growing more uncertain. "She's just around the corner." "I promise," Marcus replied, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. They were almost at the edge of the crowd now. It's just a few more steps and they would be out of sight. But Thunder had other plans. The great horse took a step forward, breaking from his ceremonial position for the first time in his career. The movement was subtle but deliberate. Placing himself directly between Marcus and his intended path to the street, Corporal Wellington felt the unauthorized movement and tried to correct his horse, but Thunder resisted. The stallion's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. He had no intention of allowing harm to come to the child. Thunder's dark eyes fixed directly on Marcus as the horse took another deliberate step forward. The massive animal now stood between the man and his escape route, creating an imposing barrier of muscle and determination. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he met the horse's gaze. There was something almost human in those intelligent eyes, a judgment that made him uncomfortable. "Come on, Emma, this way," Marcus said, trying to guide the little girl around the horse. But Thunder shifted again, matching Marcus's movement and blocking their path once more. The horse's nostrils flared as he snorted softly, a warning sound that only Marcus seemed to understand. Emma looked up at the enormous horse with wonder rather than fear. "He's so beautiful," she whispered, momentarily forgetting her worry about her mother. "Can I pet him?" "No, no, we need to go," Marcus said quickly, his calm facade beginning to crack. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool London morning. "Your mother is waiting, remember?" Meanwhile, Sarah had finally noticed that Emma was no longer beside her. Panic flooded through her as she spun around, scanning the crowd desperately. "Emma, Emma, where are you?" she called out, her voice rising above the sound of the ceremony. Corporal Wellington was becoming increasingly concerned about Thunder's behavior. The horse had never broken formation during a ceremony, and his superiors would not be pleased. But as he looked down at the scene unfolding below, he began to understand what his horse was seeing, the man holding the little girls. Han looked nervous and kept glancing toward the street. The child appeared confused and upset, not at all like she was with someone she knew. Wellington's military training and reading people and situations kicked in, and he realized Thunder might be responding to a genuine threat. Thunder stamped his front hoof against the cobblestones, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the morning air. Several tourists turned to look, and Marcus felt more eyes on him than he was comfortable with. This wasn't going according to his plan at all. "Please. I just want to take you to your mummy," Marcus said to Emma, but his voice sounded strained now. The little girl picked up on his changed tone and took a step backward. Closer to Thunder's protective presence, the horse lowered his massive head toward Emma, breathing softly through his nose. The gentle gesture seemed to communicate safety and protection to the frightened child. Emma reached up tentatively and touched Thunder's soft muzzle. Feeling instantly calmer, Marcus tugged on Emma's other hand, trying to pull her away from the horse, but Thunder moved forward again, this time brushing against Marcus with his shoulder. The contact was firm but not violent, a clear message that the man should step away from the child. "Emma. Oh my God, Emma." Sarah's voice cut through the crowd as she finally spotted her daughter. Relief and terror mixed in her voice as she pushed through the people, trying to reach her child. Marcus heard the woman's voice and knew his time was running out. He made one last desperate attempt to lead Emma away, but Thunder reared up slightly on his hind legs. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to create an impressive display that scattered the nearby tourists and drew even more attention to the scene. The crowd gasped and stepped back as Thunder's impressive display commanded everyone's attention. Marcus found himself surrounded by a growing circle of onlookers, all wondering why the ceremonial horse was acting so strangely. His plan for a quiet, unnoticed departure had completely fallen apart. "Let go of me," Emma suddenly cried out, finally understanding that something was very wrong. She tried to pull her hand free from Marcus's grip, but he held on tighter, panic making him desperate. Sarah broke through the crowd just as Marcus made his final attempt to drag Emma toward the street. "That's my daughter. Let go of her," she screamed, rushing forward with a mother's protective fury. Corporal Wellington now understood exactly what was happening. He spoke quietly to Thunder, and the horse responded immediately. The stallion stepped sideways, positioning himself so that Marcus was completely trapped between the horses' body and the crowd of tourists who were now very interested in what was happening. Marcus looked around frantically, realizing he was surrounded with no way out. Thunder's massive form blocked any escape route, and the crowd was pressing closer. Many people now pulling out their phones to record the unusual scene. "I was just helping her find her mother," Marcus said loudly, trying to sound innocent, but his voice shook with fear and frustration. "She was lost, and I was taking her to safety." "He's lying," Sarah shouted as she reached them. "Emma, come to Mummy right now." Emma didn't hesitate. She broke free from Marcus's loosened grip and ran to her mother's arms. Sarah swept her daughter up, holding her tightly as tears of relief streamed down her face. Thunder kept his position, effectively pinning Marcus in place. The horse's training had taught him to respond to threats, and every instinct told him this man was dangerous. His rider no longer tried to control him, understanding that Thunder was protecting an innocent child. Marcus made one last desperate attempt to explain himself. "I'm a taxi driver. I was just trying to help. My cab is right around the corner." He pointed toward the street, but his explanation only made him look more suspicious. A taxi driver trying to take a child away from her mother. An elderly man in the crowd said loudly, "That sounds like kidnapping to me." The word kidnapping rippled through the crowd like wildfire. People began pulling out their phones, some calling the police, while others recorded everything. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. Sarah clutched Emma tightly, her mind racing as she realized how close she had come to losing her daughter. "Thank God for that horse," she whispered, looking up at Thunder with gratitude. The stallion seemed to understand, nodding his great head slightly as if acknowledging her thanks. Police sirens could be heard in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Someone in the crowd had called 999, and help was on the way. Marcus heard the sirens too, and made one final attempt to push past Thunder. But the horse simply shifted his weight and blocked him completely. The majestic animal stood like an immovable guardian, his dark eyes never leaving Marcus's face. There was something almost ancient in the horse's bearing, as if he carried the protective spirit of all the war horses who had served before him. 2 police officers arrived at the scene within minutes, pushing through the crowd that had grown to nearly 50 people. The ceremonial guards had halted their performance, and the entire area buzzed with tension and excitement. PC Sarah Chen and PC Michael Roberts quickly assessed the situation. Taking in the sight of the man trapped by the horse, the crying mother holding her child, and the dozens of witnesses with phones recording everything. "What's the situation here?" PC Chen asked, approaching Sarah first while her partner kept an eye on Marcus. "This man tried to take my daughter," Sarah said. "He told her I was waiting by his taxi. If it wasn't for this horse, he would have gotten away with her." Emma buried her face in her mother's shoulder, but peeked out occasionally to look at Thunder. The horse remained in position, creating a living barrier between Marcus and any possible escape route. PC Roberts approached Marcus carefully. "Sir, I need you to step away from the horse and come with me for questioning. I didn't do anything wrong." Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I was just trying to help a lost child. Ask anyone." "Actually, we did ask," called out a woman from the crowd. "I saw the whole thing. The little girl wasn't lost. She was standing right next to her mother, and this man lied to her to get her to come with him." More witnesses began speaking up, each confirming the same story. Marcus felt the last of his hopes slipping away as Thunder continued to watch him with those penetrating dark eyes. Corporal Wellington finally spoke from atop his mount. "Officer, I've been watching from up here. This man definitely tried to lead the child away from her mother. My horse sensed something was wrong before any of us did." PC Chen looked up at the rider with interest. "Your horse did this on his own?" "Thunder has exceptional instincts," Wellington explained. "He's been trained for protection as well as ceremony. He positioned himself to prevent this man from leaving with the child." Thunder seemed to understand that the immediate danger had passed. The horse relaxed slightly, but remained alert, ready to act again if needed. His ears twitched as he listened to the conversations around him, somehow understanding that the human authorities were now handling the situation. Marcus finally realized that his situation was hopeless. Surrounded by witnesses, trapped by a horse, and facing 2 police officers, he had no choice but to surrender. "Fine," he said quietly, raising his hands. "But I wasn't going to hurt her. I just miss my own daughter." The admission sent a chill through everyone who heard it. This wasn't a random act, but something planned by a man dealing with his own painful loss in the most dangerous way possible. PC Roberts carefully approached Thunder, who remained calm as the officer gently moved past him to reach Marcus. "Sir, you're under arrest on suspicion of attempted kidnapping. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court." As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, Thunder finally stepped aside, his job complete. The horse had successfully protected an innocent child using nothing but his instincts, his training, and his natural protective nature. The crowd began to disperse as the immediate drama ended, but many people remained to witness the conclusion of this extraordinary event. As Marcus was led away to the police car, his shoulders slumped in defeat, Sarah approached Thunder with Emma still in her arms. The massive horse lowered his head gently, allowing the little girl to stroke his nose once more. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the stallion, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Thunder's response was a soft whicker, almost as if he understood her gratitude. Emma giggled through her tears and planted a small kiss on the horse's muzzle. "You're the best horse in the whole world," she declared with the absolute certainty that only a child could possess. The story quickly spread beyond the immediate crowd. Within hours, videos of Thunder protecting Emma were being shared across social media platforms worldwide. News reporters arrived at the scene, interviewing witnesses and trying to understand how a ceremonial horse had prevented a kidnapping. Corporal Wellington found himself in the unusual position of being interviewed while still mounted on Thunder. "I've been riding horses for 12 years, he told the BBC reporter, "but I've never seen anything like this." Thunder wasn't just following his training today. He was making decisions, reading the situation, and acting to protect that little girl, Dr. Rebecca Hartley, an animal behavior expert from the Royal Veterinary College, was brought in to explain Thunder's actions. "Horses are incredibly intelligent animals with strong protective instincts," she explained to the gathered media. "They can read human emotions and intentions in ways that sometimes surpass our own abilities." This horse likely sensed the man's deception and the child's distress before any human realized what was happening. Back at New Scotland Yard, Marcus sat in an interview room facing Detective Inspector Williams. The taxi driver's story slowly emerged through questioning. His divorce, the loss of custody of his daughter, his growing depression and isolation, it's all leading to this moment of terrible judgment. "I wasn't going to hurt her," Marcus repeated for the 3rd time. "I just wanted to spend time with someone who reminded me of Lucy. Maybe take her for a ride around London, and buy her some ice cream, then bring her back." "But you lied to her," D. Williams pointed out. "You told her that her mother had sent you? That's not the behavior of someone with innocent intentions." Marcus stared at his hands, unable to meet the detective's eyes. "I know it was wrong. I know that now. But I've been so lonely and she looked so happy. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to make a child smile." Meanwhile, Thunder had become an instant celebrity. The Royal Guard's social media accounts were flooded with messages praising the horse's heroic actions. People from around the world were calling him a hero, and there were already discussions about giving him some form of official recognition. Emma, safe at home with her mother, had drawn a picture of Thunder with crayons. In her childish artwork, the horse wore a crown and had wings like an angel. "He's a magic horse, Mummy," she explained seriously. He knew that man was bad. Sarah had given several interviews to news outlets, always emphasizing how grateful she was to Thunder and his rider. "I was so focused on taking pictures that I let my guard down for just a moment," she admitted. "It's every parent's worst nightmare, but thanks to that incredible horse, it didn't become a tragedy." The incident had also sparked conversations about child safety at public events. Tourism officials announced plans to increase security at popular attractions and to educate parents about staying vigilant, even during seemingly safe activities like watching ceremonial events. As evening fell over London, Thunder was back in his stable, being groomed and fed by his handlers, who treated him with even more respect than usual. The horse seemed to understand that something special had happened. But for him, protecting the innocent was simply what he had been born to do. 3 months later, Buckingham Palace was bustling with activity as preparations were made for a very special ceremony. Thunder stood in his stable, being groomed to perfection by his handler, Sergeant Mills, who had cared for the horse since he arrived at the Royal Guard 5 years earlier. "Today's your big day, old boy," Mills said softly as he brushed Thunder's coat to a perfect shine. The horse seemed to sense the importance of the occasion, standing perfectly still and alert in the courtyard. A small crowd had gathered for what the palace called an informal recognition ceremony. Sarah and Emma were there, both dressed in their finest clothes. Emma wore a new blue dress and clutched a drawing she had made for Thunder, this one showing him with a medal around his neck. Members of the press were present, but in smaller numbers than during the initial incident. The story had become part of London folklore, shared in pubs and around dinner tables as an example of how animals sometimes understood things better than humans. Corporal Wellington, now promoted to Sergeant Wellington partly due to his handling of the situation, led Thunder into the courtyard. The horse moved with his usual dignity, but there was something extra in his bearing today. As if he knew this ceremony was about him, a representative from the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was present to award Thunder their gold medal for animal heroism. It was only the 15th time in the organization's history that such an honor had been bestowed. Thunder's actions that day demonstrated the very best qualities we see in animals, the RSPCA representative said during her speech. His instinctive protection of a child in danger, his intelligence in understanding the situation, and his determination to prevent harm make him a true hero. Emma was invited to place the medal around Thunder's neck. She approached the great horse with complete confidence now, having visited him several times since the incident. Thunder lowered his head to make it easier for the little girl to reach, and the crowd applauded as the medal settled against his chest. "Thank you for saving me," Emma whispered to Thunder as she hugged his neck. "You're still the best horse in the whole world." Marcus Hartwell had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for attempted kidnapping, but he was also receiving counseling for his depression and grief. In a letter read at the ceremony by his lawyer, he'd written, "I want to thank that horse for stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I was hurting, but that was no excuse for what I tried to do. I hope someday I can be worthy of forgiveness." Dr. Hartley, the animal behavior expert, gave a short presentation about the intelligence of horses and their ability to read human intentions. Thunder's story reminds us that animals are not just our companions, but our protectors and teachers. They often see what we miss and act when we hesitate. As the ceremony concluded, Thunder was led back to his stable, the medal proudly displayed around his neck. But the real reward for the noble stallion was the knowledge that Emma was safe. Continuing to grow up happy and protected, the story of Thunder and Emma became a children's book, with all proceeds going to charities that protected children and cared for horses. Schools around the country used it as a teaching tool about stranger danger and the importance of listening to their instincts. Every morning, Thunder continued his duties with the Royal Guard, standing watch over the palace and its visitors. Tourists would often point him out, telling their children about the horse who became a hero. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, when the ceremonies were finished, Thunder would catch a familiar scent in the crowd and know that Emma and her mother had come to visit, their guardian angel with 4 legs and a heart full of courage. The bond between the girl and the horse remained strong, a reminder that sometimes protection comes from the most unexpected places, and that heroes don't always walk on 2 legs.